Your Honor, this is a minor traffic matter. We're prepared to dismiss. Ms. Carter stepped forward. Keep your voice steady. Please don't close it. I have 1 page left. The courtroom air conditioner rattled, a tired metal cough echoing off oak benches. Fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere in the back, a phone buzzed and died. Judge Harold Whitman leaned back, eyes already drifting toward the stack of files waiting for lunch. He had seen this posture 1,000 times. The bowed shoulders, the tight hands of a young defendant bracing for a word that would end everything. Alyssa Carter, 19, stood alone at the defense table. No attorney. No family behind her. Just a thin manila folder pressed to her chest like a life vest. Her sneakers squeaked when she shifted her weight. The bailiff cleared his throat, impatient. Ms. Carter, the judge said, tapping his pen. You were cited for failing to appear and obstruction. You understand why the court is inclined to dismiss this case without further hearing. Dismiss. The word fell like a gavel before the gavel fell. Alyssa swallowed. Her mouth tasted like pennies. Your Honor, she said, keeping her eyes up, I need you to read one name. A few heads turned. The clerk paused mid-keystroke. The prosecutor's jaw tightened. There's one thing I haven't told you yet, Alyssa added, softer now, as if the walls themselves might interrupt. And it changes everything. Judge Whitman exhaled through his nose. Young lady, the court does not entertain theatrics. He gestured toward the clock. We are behind schedule. Behind schedule. That was how it felt when your bus left early. When the rent notice slid under the door. When your mother's voicemail went unanswered. Alyssa felt the folder tremble. She steadied it with both hands. Permission to submit an exhibit, she said. Her voice cracked once, then held. The prosecutor rose halfway from his chair. Your Honor! The judge lifted a finger. Not for Alyssa. For the room. Silence settled again, thin as paper. Proceed, Judge Whitman said, already sounding done. Alyssa stepped forward. The folder brushed the table. Inside was a single page, edges worn from being unfolded and refolded, carried from bus to bus, office to office. She slid it across. The clerk took it, glanced at the heading, and froze. A beat passed. Then another. Judge Whitman frowned. Read it into the record, he said. The clerk's voice wavered. Name listed under reporting authority, she began. She stopped. Looked up. Looked back down. Your Honor, should I? Yes, the judge snapped. Read the name. The clerk inhaled. The room leaned in. When the name was spoken aloud, the pen slipped from Judge Whitman's fingers and clattered across the bench. Enjoying this? Tap subscribe for tomorrow's story. The courtroom did not erupt. It tightened. Judge Whitman straightened, as if the bench had shifted beneath him. He picked up his pen, rolled it once between his fingers, and set it down with care. Clerk, he said evenly, confirm the document's origin. The clerk nodded, throat dry. Filed electronically 3 days ago, Your Honor. Cross-referenced with county records. Alyssa Carter stood very still. Her heart hammered against her ribs, loud enough she was sure the microphone would catch it. She did not look back at the gallery. She kept her eyes on the seal stamped at the top of the page, the one she had memorized. Judge Whitman leaned forward. Ms. Carter, he said, slower now. You claimed obstruction because you failed to appear. You also claimed you were denied notice. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. And this document, he said, tapping the page once, is meant to explain that failure. Yes, sir. The prosecutor cleared his throat. Your Honor, even if the name is notable, the defendant still bears responsibility. Sit, the judge said, not raising his voice. The prosecutor sat. There was one thing Alyssa hadn't said yet. Not because it was dramatic, but because it hurt. She remembered the envelope that never came. The voicemail that said, "Number disconnected." The letter taped crooked to her apartment door after she missed work to stand in a line that went nowhere. Judge Whitman looked at her over his glasses. Why didn't you bring counsel? Alyssa's shoulders lifted and fell. I tried. The legal clinic told me to come back with proof. This is the proof. He studied her face. 19. Tired eyes. No jewelry. No attitude. Just a quiet insistence that refused to lie down. If you want the full truth, hit like so this story reaches more people. The judge nodded once, as if deciding something privately. State your address for the record. 742 Willow Street. Reno. The clerk typed. The keys sounded too loud. Employment? I work mornings at a grocery on Sierra Avenue. Stalking. School? Community college. Nights. Judge Whitman glanced again at the page. He didn't read it aloud this time. He didn't have to. The name sat there, bolded, like a weight. Ms. Carter, he said, walk me through the day you were cited. Alyssa took a breath. I was pulled over leaving work. The officer said there was a warrant for missing court. I told him I never got notice. He said it was already entered. I asked who filed it. And? He told me to stop asking questions. The bailiff shifted near the wall. A camera whirred softly as someone adjusted their phone. Judge Whitman lifted his eyes to the gallery. This court reminds spectators that recording is prohibited. The camera stopped. But the attention did not. Alyssa reached for the folder, then stopped herself. She let it be. Let the paper speak. There's something most people miss, she said quietly. The notice wasn't just late. It was never sent. The prosecutor stood again. Objection, speculation. Overruled, Judge Whitman said. She'll explain. Alyssa nodded. The filing system requires a reporting authority. A name. That name controls where notices go. That's what this page shows. Judge Whitman closed the folder. And that brings us back to the name, he said. He turned to the clerk. Read it again. The clerk swallowed. The room leaned forward a second time. The clerk read the name again, slower this time, each syllable landing with weight. A murmur moved through the benches, not loud enough to scold, too charged to ignore. Judge Whitman raised his hand. Silence returned, brittle as glass. Ms. Carter, he said, how did you obtain this document? Alyssa steadied herself. Public records request, Your Honor. It took 3 tries. Why 3? They said my request was incomplete. Then they said the system was down. Then they said the file didn't exist. The judge's eyes flicked to the clerk. And yet, he said, here it is. The prosecutor shifted, papers whispering. Your Honor, even if there was an administrative error, the defendant still failed to appear. The remedy is rescheduling, not dismissal, the judge finished. He nodded once. I'm aware. Alyssa felt the floor tilt. Dismissal had been the word that scared her. Now it sounded like a door half opened, then held. She spoke before fear could catch up. There's one thing I haven't told you yet, she said. I didn't just ask for my file. Judge Whitman's gaze sharpened. Go on. I asked for the audit trail. A ripple this time. The clerk's fingers hovered above the keys. The audit trail shows who entered the warrant. Alyssa continued, keeping her words short. Who approved it? And who changed the address field? The prosecutor stood fast. Your Honor, this is turning into an investigation. Judge Whitman looked at him. Looked back at Alyssa. Sometimes, he said, the courtroom is where investigations begin. He turned to the clerk. Pull the audit trail. The clerk hesitated. Your Honor, access requires. I know what it requires, the judge said. Proceed. As the clerk worked, the seconds stretched. Alyssa counted her breaths. In for 4. Out for 4. The hum of the lights felt louder. She noticed a woman in the back, mid-40s, cardigan buttoned wrong, watching her with a hand over her mouth. Judge Whitman broke the quiet. Ms. Carter, why does this matter to you so much? Alyssa's answer came without rehearsal. Because I did everything I was told. And it still almost buried me. A pause. Then the printer whirred. The clerk lifted a page. Your Honor, she said, voice steady now. The audit trail confirms entry by a supervisory account. Name? The judge asked. The clerk read it. The same name. The prosecutor sat down slowly. Judge Whitman removed his glasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose once. Ms. Carter, he said, did you ever receive a notice at Willow Street? No, sir. Did you receive one anywhere else? Alyssa shook her head. I checked. I asked the post office. Nothing. Judge Whitman looked back to the audit. The address field was altered, he said, to an address that does not exist. The room breathed in together. But here's what most people miss, Alyssa said, her voice barely above the hum. That change required approval. Judge Whitman's jaw set. And the approving authority, he said, reading, is the same name. He leaned back. For the first time since the case was called, he did not look bored. He looked careful. Comment justice if you believe she deserved justice. Judge Whitman rapped the bench lightly. This court will take a brief recess. Alyssa's knees nearly gave out. As the judge stood, he paused. Looked at her. Ms. Carter, he said, do not leave the building. I won't, she said. He nodded once. Good. The bailiff called the recess. People stood, whispering now. Phones stayed down. Eyes stayed on Alyssa. She gathered her folder. The single page inside felt heavier than before. Because when the court returned, she knew one question would be asked. And when it was, everything would change. The hallway outside courtroom 3 smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. Alyssa sat on a wooden bench, hands folded tight around her folder. Every few seconds the double doors opened and closed as staff passed through, their footsteps quick, purposeful. No one spoke to her. But no one looked away either. There was a clock above the water fountain. Its second hand clicked louder than it should have. When the doors finally opened again, the bailiff's voice cut through the corridor. Court is back in session. Inside, something had shifted. Judge Whitman returned to the bench with a different posture. Straighter. Focused. He glanced once at the prosecutor, then at the clerk, then at Alyssa. Ms. Carter, he said, please return to the defense table. She did. The folder stayed closed this time. The paper inside had already done its work. This court has reviewed the audit trail during recess, Judge Whitman began. And I have questions. The prosecutor rose carefully. Your Honor, you will have time, the judge said. Sit. The word landed harder than before. Judge Whitman turned to the clerk. For the record, confirm the roll attached to the supervisory account. The clerk checked her screen. County Court Administrator, Your Honor. A stir moved through the gallery. Alyssa felt it without turning around. There's something I haven't told you yet, Judge Whitman said, voice measured. This court does not often see administrative names appear in routine traffic filings. He looked at Alyssa. Ms. Carter, did you know who that name belonged to when you requested the audit? Yes, Your Honor. How? I Googled it, she said simply. It was on the county website. The prosecutor stood again, more force in his voice now. Your Honor, even if an administrator's account was used, there's no proof of intent. Systems autofill. Errors happen. Judge Whitman nodded once. They do. He leaned forward. But errors leave patterns. The clerk clicked, scrolled. Your Honor, she said, there are 12 similar address alterations in the last 6 months. Same account. The room went still. Judge Whitman did not look surprised. He looked disappointed. Alyssa felt her chest tighten. She hadn't known about the others. She had only chased her own name. But here it was, proof branching outward, like cracks in ice. A man in the back row stood halfway up, then sat. A woman whispered, "Oh my God!" and covered her mouth. Judge Whitman raised his hand. Order. He turned back to Alyssa. Ms. Carter, why didn't you give up? The question hung there, unexpected. Alyssa swallowed. Because if I did, she said, the system would think it worked. A pause. Then a nod. Judge Whitman turned to the prosecutor. The court invites the state to explain why a county court administrator's account altered a defendant's address to a non-existent location. The prosecutor opened his mouth. Closed it. Tried again. Your Honor, I would need to consult. You will, the judge said. But not before we finish this hearing. He looked to the clerk. Issue a subpoena for the administrator. Immediate appearance. The clerk's fingers flew. Alyssa's breath caught. Immediate. Judge Whitman looked back at her. Ms. Carter, he said, this court was prepared to dismiss your case quietly. He let that sit. But this next part, he continued, changes everything. Alyssa felt the weight of the room settle, not on her, but around her. Because now, it wasn't just her case anymore. And whatever happened next would be seen. Type yes if you want to see all targets hit at once. Judge Whitman rapped the bench. We will stand by. The doors at the side of the courtroom opened. And the name attached to that account was about to walk in. The side door opened with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than a slam. A woman stepped in, mid-50s, gray blazer, county badge clipped neatly at the waist. Margaret Holloway, county court administrator. She walked with the confidence of someone used to rooms stopping for her. Used to decisions being nodded through. Until now. Judge Whitman did not invite her forward. He watched her cross the floor. Watched her register the packed benches. The phones kept down. The silence. Ms. Holloway, he said at last. You were subpoenaed minutes ago. Thank you for appearing promptly. Of course, Your Honor, she replied. Calm. Professional. I was told there were questions regarding system access. There are, Judge Whitman said. Please take the witness stand. A flicker crossed her face. Gone as quickly as it came. She sat. Adjusted the microphone. Judge Whitman held up the audit printout. Do you recognize this account? Yes, she said. It's a supervisory credential. Several administrators have access. Your name is attached, he said. By default, she replied. The system assigns the department head. The prosecutor nodded eagerly. Exactly, Your Honor. Default labeling. Quiet, Judge Whitman said, eyes still on Ms. Holloway. Ms. Holloway, are you aware of address alterations made under this account? I'm aware alterations occur, she said. Clerical corrections. Corrections to non-existent addresses? The judge asked. A pause. Not long, but noticeable. I need to see specifics, she said. Judge Whitman nodded to the clerk. Exhibit B. The clerk approached, handed the page up. Ms. Holloway read. Her lips pressed together. Alyssa watched her hands. They were steady. But her thumb rubbed the edge of the paper, again and again. Ms. Holloway, Judge Whitman said, do you recall approving address changes for defendants flagged as non-responsive? Ms. Holloway looked up. That flag allows expedited processing. Expedited toward what? The judge asked. Toward resolution, she said. Clearing backlog. There it was. The word that always sounded harmless. Backlog. Alyssa felt heat rise in her chest. She raised her hand slightly. The judge saw it. Yes, Ms. Carter. Permission to ask one question, Alyssa said. Ms. Holloway glanced at her for the first time. Her eyes skimmed. Assessed. Granted, Judge Whitman said. Alyssa stood. Her voice was quiet. Ms. Holloway, she said, how many of those expedited cases belong to people without attorneys? A beat. I don't have that figure, Ms. Holloway replied. But you could get it, Alyssa said. Yes. And how many belong to people who worked hourly jobs? Alyssa asked. People who couldn't take days off to chase paperwork? The prosecutor started to rise. Judge Whitman lifted a hand. Ms. Holloway inhaled. Again, she said, I don't have. But you knew the pattern. Alyssa said. Not accusing. Stating. You knew who wouldn't come back. The room held its breath. Judge Whitman leaned forward. Answered the question. Ms. Holloway's shoulders tightened. The intent was efficiency, she said. There's one thing I haven't told you yet, Alyssa said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. When I requested my audit trail, I asked for the policy that allowed those changes. Judge Whitman looked to the clerk. Is that policy in the record? Yes, Your Honor. Read the authorization clause, he said. The clerk read. Address changes require independent verification and dual approval. Judge Whitman turned back to Ms. Holloway. Where was the second approval? Silence. The fluorescent lights hummed. The clock clicked. Ms. Holloway opened her mouth. Closed it. Alyssa felt something shift, not fear this time, but gravity. Like a door swinging open on its own weight. Share this video so communities understand what was hiding. Judge Whitman sat back. This court finds sufficient cause to halt all expedited filings under this account, effective immediately. He looked at Alyssa. Ms. Carter, he said, we are not done. Because the choice in front of him wasn't just about her case anymore. It was about what kind of court he was running. And what would happen next would force that answer into the open. Judge Whitman did not rule immediately. That was the first sign something bigger was happening. Instead, he removed a thin folder from beneath the bench, one not listed on the docket. He placed it beside Alyssa's manila folder. 2 stacks. One thin. One thick. Private. Prepared. Ms. Carter, he said, before this court determines remedy, I need to establish context. He turned to the clerk. Read the header on the internal review file. The clerk hesitated. Then read. Internal Compliance Review, initiated February 14th. Alyssa's breath caught. February. That was weeks before her citation. Judge Whitman nodded. This court ordered a quiet compliance review after irregularities were flagged by the State Audit Office. The room stirred. Even Ms. Holloway looked up sharply. There's one thing I haven't told you yet, Judge Whitman continued. This court has been waiting for a name. He opened the folder. We did not have it. Until now. He looked directly at Alyssa. Ms. Carter, when the clerk read that reporting authority aloud, you completed a pattern this court could not legally complete on its own. The prosecutor sat frozen. Ms. Holloway's composure cracked just enough to show the strain beneath. Your Honor, she said, if this is about an internal review, it should not involve a defendant. It involves anyone harmed by the conduct under review, Judge Whitman replied. Which includes this defendant. He turned to the clerk. How many cases were flagged in the internal review? 37, Your Honor. A sound moved through the benches, not loud, but collective. 37 lives briefly intersecting in one room. Judge Whitman tapped Alyssa's folder. Ms. Carter is the first to bring verified documentation into open court. Alyssa's knees trembled. She hadn't known. She had only wanted her own name cleared. Judge Whitman's voice softened. Sometimes, he said, change enters quietly. Sometimes it enters carrying one page. He looked at Ms. Holloway. This court orders your immediate removal from supervisory access pending investigation. Ms. Holloway stood abruptly. Your Honor. Sit, Judge Whitman said. She sat. He turned to the prosecutor. The state's motion to dismiss? The prosecutor swallowed. Withdrawn. Judge Whitman nodded. Good. He faced Alyssa. Ms. Carter, your failure to appear warrant is vacated. A release passed through her chest like air after deep water. But, the judge added, raising a finger, this case will not be dismissed. Alyssa blinked. This court is converting it, he said, into a recorded evidentiary matter. The room leaned forward again. Because dismissing quietly, Judge Whitman said, would let the system pretend this never happened. He met Alyssa's eyes. And that would undo what you just did? Alyssa's fingers tightened around the folder. The single page inside felt lighter now, like it had finished its work and was ready for the next hand. Judge Whitman rapped the bench. Court will proceed. Outside the room, footsteps gathered. Word had moved faster than procedure. And Alyssa realized something that made her heart race for a different reason. This wasn't the end of her case. It was the beginning of everyone else's. The courtroom doors stayed open now. People drifted in quietly, clerks from other floors, a supervisor from records, two men in suits Alyssa didn't recognize who stood along the back wall and didn't sit. The air felt charged, like a storm that had already decided where to land. Judge Whitman adjusted the microphone. For the record, he said, this court is entering a finding of procedural harm. The clerk typed, hands steady. Ms. Holloway stared straight ahead. Her badge caught the light, flashing once, then dull again. Ms. Carter, Judge Whitman said, you will remain a party to this record. Not as a defendant, but as a witness. Alyssa's mouth went dry. Witness. The word carried weight. Responsibility. Yes, Your Honor, she said. There's one thing most people miss. Judge Whitman continued. Courts correct errors every day. What they rarely do is name them. He looked to the clerk. Read the list. The clerk began. Names. Case numbers. Dates. Each one brief. Each one final. Alyssa felt them stack in her chest like stones. When the list ended, Judge Whitman turned to the prosecutor. The state is ordered to notify each affected party within 72 hours. Yes, Your Honor, the prosecutor said, voice subdued. And provide counsel, the judge added. The prosecutor nodded again. Judge Whitman faced Ms. Holloway. You are relieved of duty effective immediately. You will surrender credentials before leaving the building. Ms. Holloway's shoulders slumped, just slightly. For the first time, she looked her age. I did not intend harm, she said quietly. Judge Whitman met her gaze. Intent does not erase impact. Alyssa felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. This was not triumph. It was gravity doing its work. The judge turned back to her. Ms. Carter, you asked for one name to be read aloud. He paused. You understand now what that required? Alyssa nodded. Yes, sir. And you still did it? Yes. He nodded once. Good. The bailiff stepped forward, collected Ms. Holloway's badge. The click of the clips sounded louder than the gavel. Judge Whitman rapped the bench. This court will recess for 10 minutes while the record is secured. As people stood, a low hum filled the room. Not chatter. Processing. Alyssa sat back down slowly. Her legs shook. The woman in the cardigan from earlier caught her eye and gave a small, fierce nod. There was one thing Alyssa hadn't expected. She wasn't alone anymore. And when the court reconvened, the consequences would stop being abstract. They would start becoming real. When court resumed, the room felt heavier and clearer. Judge Whitman returned with a stack of documents thicker than before. He did not sit right away. He stood, hands resting on the bench, eyes moving from face to face. This court acknowledges the harm created, he said. And it will respond. The clerk looked up. Effective immediately, the judge continued. All failure to appear warrants issued under the expedited flag are suspended pending review. A ripple moved through the gallery. Not relief yet. Something closer to hope. The prosecutor rose. Your Honor, the state will comply. You will do more than comply, Judge Whitman said. You will assist. He turned to the clerk. Prepare notices for each affected party. Plain language. Clear dates. No abbreviations. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Whitman looked back at Alyssa. Ms. Carter, you may step down. She did. Her legs felt unsteady, but she stood tall. As she returned to the bench, she noticed people watching her differently now, not with curiosity, but recognition. The two men in suits approached the side of the bench. Judge Whitman leaned in, listened, then nodded once. For the record, he said, the State Audit Office has confirmed receipt of today's findings. That landed hard. Ms. Holloway remained seated, hands folded, eyes fixed on the table. The badge was gone. The authority with it. Judge Whitman continued. An independent monitor will oversee administrative filings for the next 90 days. 90 days. A real window. A real chance. Alyssa felt a hand brush her arm. The woman in the cardigan whispered, Thank you? Alyssa shook her head slightly. I just read, she whispered back. I just asked? The judge rapped the bench. Ms. Carter, he said, this court recognizes your diligence and restraint. He paused. You are excused. The word felt final. Gentle. Earned. As Alyssa stood to leave, the prosecutor caught her eye. He nodded once. Not apology. Acknowledgement. Outside the courtroom, the hallway buzzed now. Phones came out. Voices stayed low but urgent. Alyssa moved through it all like she was underwater. At the exit, the bailiff stopped her. Miss, he said, softer than before. You did good. She smiled, small and tired. But there was still one loop open. Because fixing records was one thing. Living with what had almost happened was another. And Alyssa hadn't faced that yet. 3 days later, Alyssa sat at her small kitchen table on Willow Street, the late afternoon light slanting across a stack of envelopes. Real envelopes this time. Official. Properly addressed. She opened them slowly, one by one. Each letter said the same thing, in plain language just like the judge ordered, Your warrant has been vacated. Your case will be reviewed with counsel provided. No action required at this time. No action required. Alyssa let the words settle. Her shoulders loosened in a way she hadn't felt in months. Her phone buzzed. A voicemail from her manager. Hey, Alyssa. Just checking in. Heard you had court stuff. Take the morning off tomorrow. We'll cover. She stared at the phone, then set it down carefully, as if it might disappear. That evening, she walked to the corner store for milk. The same officer's cruiser rolled past, slow, then turned the corner. Alyssa felt the old tension rise and fall. Nothing happened. The streets stayed quiet. At school the next night, her professor pulled her aside. I heard, he said gently. If you need extensions, you have them. Thank you, Alyssa said. She meant it. She didn't explain. She didn't have to. Later that week, a thin packet arrived from the court. Inside was a single page, copied, stamped, official. The audit summary. Her name listed once. Others listed below it. She noticed something she hadn't before. Next to her name, a handwritten note in the margin. Verified by documentation. Alyssa folded the page and placed it back in the manila folder. She didn't carry it everywhere now. It stayed in a drawer by the sink, near the bills and the bus schedules. Where it belonged. On Saturday morning, she called her mother. They talked about groceries. About weather. About nothing urgent. And for the first time in a long while, Alyssa didn't feel like she was explaining herself. But here's what most people miss. Justice isn't loud when it lasts. It shows up in quiet mornings. In doors that open without fear. In the simple fact that your name, once written down, stays written correctly. Alyssa washed her mug, dried it, and set it on the rack. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, something had finally settled. 4 months later, the courtroom on the 3rd floor looked the same, and it didn't. The fluorescent lights still hummed. The benches still creaked. But there was a new sign posted near the clerk's window, printed in plain black letters. Notice procedure, read before leaving. Alyssa noticed it as she walked past, not as a defendant this time, but as a volunteer. She wore a simple badge now. Court assistant's desk. 2 mornings a week, she helped people find the right window, the right form, the right day to come back. She did not give advice. She gave directions. She gave calm. A man in his 60s approached, clutching papers with shaking hands. They said I missed something, he murmured. Alyssa smiled gently. Let's check, she said. What's your name? He told her. She wrote it down carefully. Spelled it back. He nodded. Across the hall, Judge Whitman passed by. He slowed when he saw her. Miss Carter, he said. Your Honor, she replied. He nodded toward the sign. It's a start. Yes, sir, she said. It is. Later that afternoon, she stepped outside into the fall air. Leaves skittered across the steps. She sat for a moment, just watching people come and go. From her bag, she took out the manila folder. It was thinner now. Almost empty. Inside was the single page that started everything, edges still worn. She looked at it once more, then slid it back and closed the folder. She didn't need to carry it anymore. Somewhere inside the building, a clerk read a name aloud, carefully this time. Somewhere else, a notice went out to the right address. Change didn't announce itself. It showed up quietly. It stayed. If this shocked you, comment truth below. And before you go, like this story if it moved you. Comment what moment stayed with you the longest. And subscribe, so you don't miss tomorrow's true heart story. Yendi, thanks for watching.